Welcome to the Thriving on Purpose podcast, where we teach Christian entrepreneurs how to build a strong foundation of faith, growth, and skill to lead and thrive on purpose in life and business. And now, here are your hosts, certified coaches Elisabeth and Sebastien Richard.
Hi guys, welcome to this episode of the Thriving on Purpose podcast. I am Sebastien Richard and I'm here with the birthday girl,
Elisabeth Richard,
who turns 38 today.
Yes.
Happy birthday, sweetheart. And
thank you.
For the occasion, it's really special because today we're going to do an episode that's dedicated to women. It's the first top women episode. And what we mean by top women, we mean Thriving on Purpose women episode dedicated entirely for women. We did a couple for men, and today we're going to do one for women. The reason we're doing an episode for women is because we've noticed that it seems to be a recurring theme on social media, on YouTube. I've seen tons of videos for women on how to find a godly man, a godly date, a godly husband. It's all over the place. There's all kinds of advice, but most of them pretty much align. I mean, generally speaking, we have our own take on it, and we are going to give you what we think are the 5 things to look for in a Christian husband.
Yes, so we wrote a few points for you based on, some of what the scriptures say, but also on a compilation of different things that we've been taught when we were also seeking to look for a mate when we were pretty young. And, we both had our own journey, and we both, had some counsel from Christian men and Christian women. I had some in Bible college, and Sebastien had some guidance when he was at church when he was young. So there's different things that we've seen through time that we've seen that this is such a pain point. And I think that with time passing, I don't know if it's because now we're in a modern age, and, women have changed and there's a little more feminism, or, there's been changes in the church and stuff. But I think that there's a lot of guidance that young women today, and even women that are older, maybe, you've been in a previous relationship that went bad, and you're giving it a second go, and you're looking for somebody. Mm-hmm. So I think that these steps, this woman's guide basically is really going to help you to look for the right things to really choose the right mate for you.
Yeah, whether you're 25 or 50 and you're looking for a second husband, these pointers we believe are universal for all women. And for all ages too. So yeah. They're really good for that.
And as you guys know, we're certified coaches, so we've done our trainings for coaching. And so when we do coaching, there's a lot of things that pertain to relationships that we teach people, Christian men and women. So we're compiling a lot of our good advice at the same time, and things that we've learned along the way. Yeah. We've been married for 16 years. So as you know, good men are hard to find, but not all taken. And I know that a lot of women in church sometimes
they basically have the mentality, all the good ones are taken.
Yeah.
Right? I've heard that so many times, and it's just not true. That's a scarcity mindset, and it's wrong.
Yeah, so exactly. So the first point that we're going to focus on is a man with a heart for God. So how to identify a man with a heart for God? Do you want to elaborate, Sebastien?
Well, I'm not a woman, first of all, but I do know what the Bible teaches about what a godly man should be like. Mm-hmm. You got to keep in mind, if you're a woman, that you're going to be looking for the person who's going to become, by God's appointment, the leader of the household. So you got to look for someone that you can look up to. Okay, and oftentimes that's a big problem, especially in today's day and age. Women tend to be very educated and sometimes they have a very good career going, and sometimes they're entrepreneurs themselves. They're thriving, they're flourishing. It's easy for women today to look down on men. And it's becoming harder and harder for women today to look up to men. And it's kind of a problem, because there's more and more educated women out there. There's more and more of these women who are thriving, doing things on their own. So the ratio of men who they can look up to seems to be becoming smaller and smaller. The percentage of these types of men that they're going to be attracted to because they look up to them as leaders, as potential mates, it's becoming harder for women to find these types of guys. So what often ends up happening, even in the church, is that they settle. They settle for the type of guy that is not the man that should run a household, that's going to be a godly, strong husband. So it's a big problem. So there's some things that women need to look for, and godliness is the first one. And this number one point cannot be overemphasized. Here's what I believe, okay? We're going to talk about the 5 things to look for in a Christian husband. This is the number one, okay? You want a man with a heart for God. In other words, a man that has godliness. If he has that and lacks the 4 others, you can still work with that. If he has the 4 others but doesn't have that, don't even date him. It's that important. So that number one point is huge.
And I know that for younger women, it's harder to understand what that means. A godly man, you might be dating somebody that's in his early 20s, and you don't see everything that he's about because he's young and he's just starting his life, basically. But I was there, years ago when I was dating Sebastien. I was 19. This is one of the things that was so important to me was, does he love God? Because you can say you love God and you can do the church motions, and and what I mean by motions, a lot of people in church just do the religious thing. They go to church on Wednesday night, they go to church on Sundays, and they say they read their Bibles, but does he really, really love God to the point where he's always talking about things he's discovering in Scripture and fascinated with God's Word? Does it matter to him if he's pleasing God or displeasing God in his actions, in the daily decisions that he makes for his life? Like, these things were all things that really stood out for me with Sebastien, and I knew that he really wanted to please God more than anything. So I knew that even if he was young, and at the time when I got married, I was 21 and he was 27, so he was older than I was. But I could see so much of, his heart for God, that that for me was so very important. And I was told in Bible college, when we did some teachings on how to be a good Christian woman, and, the different spiritual aspects of that, and how to look for a good Christian man, that was one of the main points. And they were trying to educate us on that and help us to, have guidance in that, what that looks like. And, if you're young and you're in the church, then you have other godly men that you can look up to as examples. And like I said, if the guy's young, you have to give him a chance to live his life, to show what he's about. But obviously you won't see the same fruits of a Christian godly man at 40 as you would at 20, right? So you have to be... I
call that the diamond in the rough factor.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to recognize those diamonds in the rough, because when a guy is 20 years old, 25, he's not going to demonstrate the same level of maturity as a 40-year-old, and that's perfectly normal. But you have to look for certain things. There's a quote I wrote down here, and I want to share with you. And by the way, it comes from me, so if you want to tweet it, just write my name next to it. That'd be great. I'm just kidding here. But it's a really good quote. I when I wrote it, I really felt this was accurate. A man with the heart of a king will treat you like a queen. So look at his heart. I know that there's so many other factors that especially younger women will look at, and even the older ones. Does he have money? Does he, I don't know, is he flashy, or is he charming? And all these things are really good, but I see them as the icing on the cake. The heart for God, does he have a heart of a king? That's kind of harder to find. It's really, you're going to see that more in the things like how he treats his mom, how he treats people that are beneath him. And when I say that, I mean people that can't do anything for him. Look at how that God behaves with people who can do nothing for him. Does he treat them with respect, with kindness? That tells volumes about the heart of a man. Mm-hmm. So these are little things you can look at that are going to give you a pretty good insight into the man's heart.
My mom always told me that before she passed away, when I was 16, we had some conversations, and she always said, look at how he treats his mother, because she says that is the one person, the first experience that he's had with a female figure. And if he respects her and he treats her really well, and his sisters as well, other female figures in the family, then obviously he's going to treat you well. Because, when you get married and there's the mundane things of life, then, the romance kind of changes, and the passion, changes, and there's like ups and downs and stuff, because things happen in life, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a good gauge for you to know, how things are going to be in the future. If he knows how to treat his mom with respect and love, then pretty much he's learned a good foundation, right?
And there's something that bothers me that I've seen throughout my years as a believer. I've oftentimes seen women complain that they can't find a good man, a good husband, or this or that. And yet, oftentimes, they're right under their noses, and they ignore these guys. And they look for guys at work, they look for guys at school, they look for guys in all other environments where it's hit or miss. I mean, let's be honest, the percentage of Christians out there is not that high. So why do you even bother looking among unbelievers for the values, for the character that only a man who loves God will demonstrate? And I've seen so many women do that, and they start dating the guy, he's an unbeliever, and then they invite him to church. And it's common. Guys don't do that as much. Guys are more gonna look, they're Christians, they're serious in their faith, they're gonna look for a Christian woman. But the women, for some reason, they want to play savior with the guy. Yeah. They have the need to, he's so wonderful, he's a great guy, he's charming. If he comes to church and he accepts Jesus and he converts, I know he's gonna make a great man. Yeah, but that's a lot of ifs. I mean, seriously, do you have all that time to waste? And it might happen, but even if it does, let's suppose it does happen. If you've known the Lord for 10 years, and you date this guy, and he does convert, what does that make him? It makes him a baby Christian. He just converted. How can he possibly be a spiritual leader in your couple if you have 10 years of experience walking with God, and he's got 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I've seen that time and again, and for some reason, all these relationships were doomed from the start. Because what ended up happening is that they got married, and you could see the marriage was not going well because the woman was trying to be the spiritual leader. Yeah. Because she was always trying to encourage the guy to pray more with her, to read the scriptures more, to be the spiritual leader. Sometimes I would hear these women complain, why don't you take charge more? Well, hello. He's taking charge for the level of maturity he has. But unfortunately, you've been walking with God so much longer that what he can bring to the table maybe doesn't bless you in the way that it should.
Exactly. So if he hasn't been raised in a Christian home where he's had the examples and the foundation of what it is to lead godly servant leadership, if you want, towards his father towards his mother, he hasn't seen this for many years, then he has no gauge on how to guide you spiritually, to bring you up in your faith, to do all those things that solidify a marriage, which is basically, devotionals and praying together. And most importantly, when you're going to have kids down the road, you automatically will want him to raise your kids in Christian values and teach them Christian things. And that's where it becomes very rocky, because oftentimes the Christian guy that was saved not that long ago is very lenient, very it's not that important. I wasn't raised like that, and look how I turned out. And I've seen so many problems, and I've seen a lot of women go through a lot of pain because they wanted so badly for their husband to step up and to automatically grow spiritually, 5 years,
grow a spiritual backbone,
6 months, right?
But he can only give what he has, and
it's a process, and he's in a learning process, and so it's just risky. That's all we're saying. It's a risk that you take, thinking that because he's saved, he's gonna nosedive in his Bible and become this spiritual giant that you need. It's not going to happen. Let's be honest.
And that approach that is more common than we think has actually caused a lot of Sunday widows, they call them. Basically these women who go to church with their kids on Sunday, and the guy stays home and watches football. Because it was could have been not a true conversion, or maybe he just feels a disconnect with his wife and a disrespect from her, so he just doesn't want to engage as a result. That's also a possibility. But there's so many potential problems when a woman who is, who's got some years of maturity in her walk with God, who seeks an unbeliever, is just a no-no. Don't do that. There's actually some interesting statistics here. A survey found that if a child is the first person in a household to become a Christian, there is a 3.5% probability everyone else in the household will follow. Okay, so let's say mom and dad aren't Christians, and the child has a friend who's a Christian and he converts. Well, there's only a 3.5 probability that everyone else in the household would follow that. If the mother is the first person in the household to become a Christian, then there is a 17% probability everyone else in the household will follow. So that's is quite higher than if it's a child. But 17% is not that great. So the mom's the queen of the household. It's a significant role. We know how influential our mothers are. And yet, if the mother converts, only 17% of the whole household will follow. However, get this. Now this is huge for you women out there, to understand just how important it is to have a man who loves God. Here it is. When the father is the first one to convert, there is a 93% probability that everyone else in the household will follow. Now that statistic speaks volumes of the importance of the male headship of a man who loves God. So this is why I said that point cannot be overemphasized. That's just how important it is, okay? There's a meme I saw on Facebook once. I thought it was so beautiful because you saw a woman who was dancing with Jesus, and it was kind of a nice painting, very nice. It said underneath, be so busy dancing with Jesus that he will have to ask permission to cut in. And I'm going to tell you something. If you as a woman are very much in love with God, and a man has the backbone to want you to step up and be the man that you would be proud of, that demonstrates a lot of character right there. So pay attention if there's a guy who wants to cut in while you're dancing with Jesus.
Yeah, that's really nice. And also, I would say, it's kind of like a mirror. I hear so many women say that they're looking for this, they're looking for that, and they have this super long list. But if you ask them, okay, well, if I would ask you, do you have any of those 10 points, for example? most of them would kind of question if they do. So, if you have to be reasonable. If you're asking for, the moon and you just have so many criterias, then you have to also work on yourself and become that godly woman as well. So,
absolutely, yeah.
So,
That's the first thing. If you're single, you need to concentrate on yourself to become the best man or woman that God wants you to be.
Yeah, and, it's about having a personal relationship with God, but it's also about growing as a woman and respecting yourself and loving yourself for the princess that God created, the princess of the king. So if you are not behaving like a princess of the king, you're not respecting yourself in the way you dress, you're not respecting yourself in the way you talk, don't expect to attract a godly man. They won't be attracted to you. Exactly. It's that simple.
Yeah.
I've been to so many churches where I can really, I had no idea. If I didn't know I was in a church, if I looked at the way the women were dressed, I thought I was in, some kind of club or something. It was really it really struck me, So you need to just think, what would attract a godly man? You have to respect yourself. You have to conduct yourself in a ladylike manner, and that counts for a lot. Does he, when you go into a secular place and there's people that are not saved, are they careful with the way they speak to you, knowing that you ooze out spiritual Christian perfume, let's say, I've been into shops. I've worked in shops where there were guys that were very, very
crude,
disgusting. Okay, yeah. And it was a government position, a government job. So I started doing that because of the money and because sorting mail and stuff. But the guys that I was around were not very respectful kind of men. Okay, so a lot of them were the beer bottle kind of guys that swear in the back of trucks and stuff. But every time they were around me, they just would shut up and never swear. And if ever one of them would say anything by accident, they look at me and say they're sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so why did that happen? It's because I respect myself. I was careful in the language I used, the way I dressed, the way I conducted myself. So they knew that I would look at them like, what are you doing? If they would talk to me that way. And yet there's other women around that they wouldn't even think twice, that they would start swearing with and saying, crude jokes. Why? Because they can feel that these women do not respect themselves. Now, obviously, we're talking about secular, a non-Christian environment.
But the effect is there anyway.
But in the church realm, there's some of that too. There are some ladies that do not respect themselves, and they know what the Bible says about sex before marriage, and they know all these things, but, they just don't respect themselves, and Christian men won't respect you either. And you will attract the Christian man that you're attracting with the way you're attracting him, right? So it's better, and I know a lot of young women, they just want attention and they want men to look at them and this and that, but that's not what you want. When you're in a church, that's not what you want. You don't want a man to be looking at your legs. You want him to be, looking at your heart, trying to get to know you because you're a wonderful person, because you're funny, because you have a lot of characteristics that he wants to get to know. So you want to attract serious contenders that want your hand and not guys that just want to have fun, because there are those guys in churches too. Don't be fooled.
Yeah, and when it comes to the dress code, Paul Washer once mentioned a good rule of thumb, if you will. He said, if the way you dress acts as a frame for your face, it works. If it acts as a frame for your body, you shouldn't wear it. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was a good rule of thumb for women to know how to dress and, attract the attention to the right place, right?
Exactly. So point number 2 is a man who knows his purpose. Okay, so this is so important. It is crucial because a man who does not know his purpose, his life mission, will be completely miserable and will make you miserable. So maybe you'd like to expand on that?
Yeah, well, You kind of experienced that a little bit, Liz.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm being polite here. Not a little bit, quite a bit, actually. Before I found my purpose, I was miserable. I was depressed. I was aimless. I didn't know where I was going. And guess what happens to the woman who's with you when you're like that as a man? Obviously, she's going to be miserable. She's not going to be happy. And she might end up being depressed. And she's going to start looking down on that man. And a man needs to find, first and foremost, his purpose. And as men, it's not always easy. Me, I came from a background of divorce and emotional turmoil. And I so wanted to find a wife. For me, that was the end all be all. I saw my parents divorce twice. And I was like, this is not going to be me. I'm going to make it work. And I'm going to be a great husband. And so I kind of deified marriage, or put it on a pedestal. Like I so wanted to succeed at marriage that I made it my life's purpose. And yet it wasn't. And so I got married, but I had not found what I was supposed to do, what my life's mission was, why God put me on this earth. And as a result, while I was looking and thinking and considering and being depressed, well, my wife was being depressed as well. So when a man hasn't found himself, stay away. He's not ready for marriage. Simple as that. I don't care if he's 45. I don't care if he's 25. If he hasn't found his purpose, stay away from that man, because he's just going to drag you down. I don't care if he's a millionaire. I don't care if it's not because he's a millionaire that he's found his purpose. Okay? He might still just be doing it as a job, and he just happens to be really good at that. So you need to pay attention. Has this guy found what he was put on earth for?
At least, for me, I can say that Sebastien was always seeking for his purpose. So he was doing a blue-collar job, very miserable doing it. And that played a toll on our marriage. It really did weigh down our marriage at times. And when he was able to get to that point where I'm going to trust God and I'm going to pray and I'm going to ask him unceasingly, and I know he's going to answer me. And then, God did answer him with time and with the different, journey that he took. And he was always obedient and seeking. So that made it livable. There's men out there that are just miserable and they just don't know their purpose and they just do their mundane thing in and out. And the only fun that they have is Friday night when they can, go out and have a beer and then finally live on the weekend. Those guys are not going to be happy with a routine of having children, of doing the mundane things in life, because they already don't like what they're doing with their work. And that's the risk, that's the danger, because, Sebastien could have been the type of person that said, well, that's my life and I'm going to accept it and it sucks and I just don't like what I'm doing, and just dragged his whole family down, because we know, if he's not happy, then the whole family feels it, right?
Yeah, well, see, I just want to interject here, because we often hear that, and even when I asked for your hand in marriage, your dad took a piece of paper and he wrote that very sentence down on a piece of paper and he gave it to me, and it said, happy wife, happy life. And we've all heard it, and we hear it in church all the time. And it's true, but here's the thing. Husbands need to be happy as well. In fact, it's crucial that they are, just as much as the woman. And so I saw, recently I saw someone who wrote, it should say instead, happy spouse, happy house. Because both need to be happy.
Right.
The woman and the man need to be happy in order for the household and the couple to go well. So I think that's very important to mention. Also, you mentioned, when men become aimless and they don't have a purpose and all they think about is drinking beer or going to sports events or hanging out with their friends. Well, I came to the conclusion that one of the best clues to know if your man is living with purpose, is to looking at how he spends his spare time. Okay, and here's a good clue, a rule of thumb for you women out there. Okay, if the man you're with has a man cave instead of a study, chances are he hasn't found his purpose, unless he actually has a job in high-level sports and he's like a coach or something, just, making a good living at it. But if he has a man cave instead of a study, there's a good chance he hasn't found his purpose. Because man caves are just for entertainment. They're just for men who escaping. They're just for men who drag themselves from Monday to Friday, waiting desperately for Friday to come so they can spend time in their man cave all weekend, watching sports events with their buds and drinking their bud. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And, if you're young and you're looking for a spouse, then, maybe these things are not so obvious to you because young men won't, show these things as much. But you can see, if he's only about sports, if he's only about doing, thrill kind of things, and he's not able to, do things with you, quieter things, and, get more deep and spiritual and, have a depth to himself. So, have some purpose in the sense that, does he have dreams? Does he have goals? Like, you might be with somebody that is not doing what he necessarily dreamt of doing, but aspires to do something else and has plans to study or to change his life around let's say he has a plan. Well, that's positive because he won't be down and depressed. He's working towards something. So especially if he's a Christian, then sometimes like we get involved in, for example, if your dad was an electrician, you started doing the business, but it's not really something that you love doing and you'd rather do something else, like be a sports coach, for example. Well, if you have a plan and you're going towards that plan, you're going to be positive and you're not going to drag the other person down with you, right? So these are just things to look for. There's nothing wrong with having a study or a man cave once in a while to retrieve yourself, to have some quiet time to read. Sometimes my husband will say, like, I'm retrieving to my man cave, but I know that means I'm going to study.
I don't have a man cave, by the way. I just have an office.
Yeah, but, I know he's going to just take time and do some research and things that he's passionate about, right? But where we're talking about the dangerous man cave, we're talking more of a secluded area where you're not allowed to be in. And it's just like, I'm always in there. And
it's decorated
all weekend. And, I don't have time for my kids because I'm just watching my sports and my football and whatnot. And you're just like, he just can't be bothered to spend time with his family. Yeah. That kind of thing.
Yeah, and I don't want people to misconstrue what I'm saying either, because there's nothing wrong with having a man cave if you have other areas where you're living the deeper life. Mm-hmm. Okay? For some guys, sports is a passion. I understand that. That's fine. I mean, I like hockey myself, but as I grew in responsibility, hockey took a back burner for me. I mean, I used to scream my head off watching hockey games. Remember that is when we were dating?
Yeah.
And obviously, you enter marriage, then 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids. Life changes, life evolves, and if you don't evolve with it, guess what? You're just staying behind. That's all I'm saying. That's just, there's nothing wrong with having a man cave if you already have something else. But if that's all you got, there's a problem.
Exactly. So another point is, number 3 is a man with common goals, background, and interests. So this is really, really important. And a lot of women don't see to what extent it's important.
Oh my goodness.
Because, there's this, common thought that, we're all different and we have to accept our differences. And so I like doing this, he doesn't like doing that, but it's okay. There's this one thing that we like doing together and let's hold on to this one thing. Well, there has to be more than that. Like, there has to be more than just your passion for both golfing, okay? Like, there has to be common goals where you're going in life the things that you want out of life have to be similar.
Your ambitions and everything that you dream of together. I mean, sure, you can have separate dreams. I mean, me and Liz have separate dreams, but you have to have common dreams too.
We also have common dreams, yeah.
There you go.
So, there's different things that we hold on to. But when we were talking about marriage in the beginning, when we actually were dating, this was something that we were right away clear about.
On the same page.
Do you want kids? Yes or no? Where do you see yourself living? What kind of life do you see yourself living? Are you a country person, a city person? How do you want to raise your kids? What kind of religion do you want to raise them in? Your family background. Like, are you very different in your family background? Have you been raised rich and you're going to marry or looking to marry someone poor?
Yeah, and that was a big pain point in our marriage. And there were some growing pains, definitely, because Liz came from a upper middle class background, and I came from a very poor background. Not even worker, beneath that, because my father was on welfare most of the time, so it's not even worker class. It was below that. So, and I knew that that's not what I wanted to give my kids, and yet, when you're raised knowing only that, it's harder to bring a higher level than what you've known,
Exactly.
to up your game. So obviously, Liz came in that game with a higher level, and I wanted to play at her level, but I wasn't always able to. So there was some growing pains on my part there, and Liz had to be patient and understanding along the way, because it was not easy for me to, I guess, be ambitious for more, or to understand the dynamics of going higher in life in that particular sphere. I was very spiritual. I loved God with all my heart, but that doesn't necessarily compensate for all what you're lacking, for what
you haven't been taught, or
what you haven't been taught, or what you didn't grow up with. So yeah, there were some growing pains there. So the background.
Yeah, so look for different things that you both like doing, that you have common interests, obviously, but not just that. I think a lot of Christian couples look too much to that. We like to do different sports and different things before we had kids, and then all of that took, a lot of that we just stopped doing when we started having a family because we were tired or we had other priorities. So that's not good enough. Like, just saying that your interest is going to watch movies and I don't know, go golfing or whatever it may be, that's not enough. You really have to have common goals of where you're going, and even race. This is a touchy topic, but I'll just say what I've seen. I've seen a lot of couples from different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, and this was a huge adjustment for them, and very, very difficult because of the way they were both raised, very different mentalities, very different cultures, and it's really hard to blend that together because you're working already. You have so much to adjust to. You have the fact that you're female, he's a male,
right there it's a challenge.
Woman and man don't think alike, and right there you have a lot to adapt with and understanding how men think and how women think, right? And then you have your Christian backgrounds, and you have your status, whether you were poor, middle class, or rich. So all that, and I know a lot of you are thinking, what does this have to do with a Christian family? God is, all that matters. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of factors. It's not that we're not saying it's not possible. We're just saying it's a lot harder. Mm-hmm. It's a lot harder, and we've seen a lot of couples break up because of religious, sometimes it's even religious reasons. One's raised super conservative Baptist, the other one's Pentecostal, very, not, I won't say liberal, but more, into spiritual gifts and talking in tongues and all kinds of different theologies. And then they're always fighting about it and how we're going to raise our kids. And, so...
imagine if a Baptist thinks that speaking in tongues is of the devil. And his wife, when she prays, in her own, personal time, starts speaking in tongues, and he hears her.
Or they fight about the church.
That's just one example. I could lead to big fights. I mean...
Yeah, or they fight about the church they're going to raise their kids going to. And, so, like, as much as possible, it's always best to find out when you're choosing a mate, when you're choosing somebody to date, ask questions. That's the best thing. That's the best way to know. I was raised Pentecostal, but I went to a Baptist college.
Moderate Pentecostal.
Yeah, it was conservative Pentecostal. But, I also was familiar with the Baptist background because I had gone to Bible college. My dad went to different churches that were Baptist. So I knew basically, both theologies, both doctrines and all that. And so when we talked, me and Sebastien, since he was raised in... not raised, but he had been going to a Baptist church for a while.
No, I wasn't raised, really.
Yeah, he was going to a Baptist church. That's all he knew, basically. But he was always open and thirsty to know more about God and open to learning.
And I knew where my denomination was actually closed-minded. So because I had read so many books from different, spiritual influences, Smith Wigglesworth on the one hand, so I would read Watchman Nee or Smith Wigglesworth, which are very different. One is very, very conservative, deeply spiritual. The other one is all about gifts,
spiritual
and healings and all that. So, and I was open to all that God had to offer. Although I went at a denomination that was more conservative. So when Liz told me she was Pentecostal, I didn't really mind that at all.
But I embraced a lot of both, So these are conversations that we had, We wanted to see if both of us were open, and we both realized that, religion didn't matter that much, that what we were both seeking was really to get to know God and to experience God and to really, dive deeper in the Bible and discover new things and stuff. So we were very open.
Yeah, and some couples, like, they don't, like Liz said earlier, the importance of asking questions early on. Some couples are going to date for 6 months and then ask the other person, how many kids do you want? Seriously? You might have a shocker. What if you want 5 and the other person wants 1, maybe none? Then you're going to be like, whoa, I wasted 6 months of my life. Because obviously this is a deal breaker. I mean, if you're going to consider a future with a person.
Yeah, and the other big problem is that a lot of women, do want children, and sometimes, depending on their age, will find somebody that has already had a family. And, sometimes they're divorced. It was a bad experience. So he's had his family. He meets somebody new, and he's like, I don't want to have other kids. And she thinks that because she's going to woo him and they're in love and whatnot, that eventually he'll change his mind. And oftentimes that's when the fights arise, and you can't expect things like that of people. If they're honest with you and they're clear about it, they didn't want any more kids, they had, even if it's an unfortunate way of, something happened and their first marriage ended, but they have beautiful kids, and for them that's enough and it ends there. You need to accept that if you're going to go into a relationship with this person, that if he says he doesn't want anymore, you have to assume that it's not going to change. So don't try to change people, For some it might. I'm not saying it's not impossible, but for other people it's just, no, I told you it was going to be like that, and then it ends up with heartbreak. And so, just make sure that when we talked about, what you want out of life and the important things, like for me, it was crucial, so important for me to have kids. I knew that this was part of my destiny. I wanted to be a mom, and I didn't even want to have anything to do with the guy that didn't want kids.
And me, I didn't even know I had a destiny. So it was all right. That's why it worked out, really. I'm just kidding.
So, you need to be choosy, and, don't get all he's wonderful and he's so good looking, and
he's so dreamy.
I just want to please him, and I'm just gonna give up on everything I really want just because you know he's so nice and he's so far. This and
like it won't be long. As soon the honeymoon's over, you're gonna be like, I gave up everything for you. How dare you? Anyway, number 4, ladies, look for a man with whom even the mundane is pleasant. And by the way, the last 2 points, you're going to be like, well, duh. Well, don't well, duh me, because let me tell you something. The last 2 points, even these last 2 points, some women trip over them. And for the life of me, I just don't get it. They are very practical and very normal, I guess you could say, but they're so important. So what does that mean? Find a man with whom even the mundane is pleasant. Well, whether we like it or not, even for the best of us, life is at least 65% a mundane experience. Okay? And here's an interesting statistical breakdown that I found online on the average North American lifespan. Okay? Get this. I'm going to read to you some statistics that I found really interesting about the average North American lifespan. The average person will spend in their lifetime 33 years in bed, 26 of which you will be sleeping, and 7 of which you are tossing and turning. So imagine that. In your lifetime, 7 years of your life, you're tossing and turning in bed, can't sleep. 13 years you will spend in your lifetime working. And now here's a shocker. Here's a shocker, especially for you entrepreneurs listening to us. 11 years of screen time. that is scary. Whether it's iPhone, tablet, TV, you name it. 11 years in front of a screen. 4.5 years eating. 200, that's scary. That one too is very scary. 235 days waiting in line at the supermarket, at the bank. 235 days. That's crazy, huh?
Yeah.
Getting ready. Getting ready for work, getting ready for church, getting ready to go out, getting ready for a party. 46 days for men. Ladies, how many days for you? 136 days getting ready. You will spend, on average, 136 days. And I'm sure that number is very average. There's probably women out there is like 300 days.
300, yeah.
And since we're talking about romance, the average American will spend in their lifespan 1 year and 30 days on romance. 1 year and 30 days on romance. So wooing, being romantic, and all that. So make those days count, okay? So all this to say that the right partner should make even the most boring stuff at least semi-enjoyable by their presence. Because after all, many moments we spend together are spent doing ordinary things. Like washing dishes, changing diapers, waiting in line.
Folding clothes.
Folding clothes, yeah, we're good at that, aren't we? Well, as much as, and I remember the pastor's wife at my church when I was starting to date. I was in my 20s and I was looking for a wife. She took me aside and she said, I'm going to give you a word of advice. Women need to feel excited. When you meet a girl, you need to take her out and give her a good time. That's great advice if you want her to fall in love with you. But at the same time, when the mundane shows up, is she going to stay with you? That's what you got to ask yourself. So if you make it so exciting in the dating phase, and then when real life happens, the real you shows up, and it's just not the exciting things anymore, well, that could be a tough adjustment. Just saying.
Yeah, so don't do too much bungee jumping in the beginning. No, but we're laughing, but Sebastien and I were very similar in the sense that we're very different, but we weren't the sporty type, so we knew
And I was scared.
So-
Oh man, she asked me a question early on.
So I asked him right away if he was a sporty type because I really did not care for sports.
I thought it was a trap. I thought she wanted a jock, and I was like, what do I answer to this? She's looking for a jock. I'm not a jock. Oh dear. And then I tried to say, well, I do enjoy the occasional
skiing.
skiing.
And I knew just by his answer because we started with online dating. Like we met through a Christian website. So our first encounters together were through internet, like just messaging each other. We hadn't even talked to each other on the phone
to
yet.
mention that, yeah.
So we'd ask each other questions to get to know each other better. And so I knew just by his answer, I was like, okay, this guy is not a sports guy. He's just trying to say the right thing. So that was okay for me because I didn't want to go skiing every weekend. And, like I like to go skating, but I'm not, this super outdoorsy type, right? So if you're the opposite and that's really, really important to you, then you need to find out if it's important to the other person. However, you have to understand that, when you're married and, there's routines and there's kids and stuff, you don't have as much time to do those things. And so it's important to, be able to do ordinary things together, like if you're in the dating phase, like, maybe, hang out with the person, go do grocery shopping, go out for coffee and chit chat and see if the person just can do these normal, ordinary things.
Wash
and
the
have
car
fun.
together.
Have fun together doing these, more ordinary things. And we realized that a lot of the ordinary stuff that was mundane out of life, we like doing. We so wanted to be together that it didn't really matter. I just always wanted to tag along whatever he was doing with his family.
There you go.
And he wanted to tag along whatever I was doing with my family. And
that gives you a good clue. You enjoy being together in the mundane stuff. Mm-hmm. It's a winner. I mean, this is good. This is good stuff. So number 5, I know you girls, you women, they're all going to go like, well, duh. Look for a man you are attracted to.
Duh.
Well, yeah, really.
Just kidding.
Have you ever wondered why the Bible tells us about how so-and-so was good looking or so-and-so woman was beautiful? I think there's something there that, how can I put this? Beauty is something that has always been appreciated, no matter what epoch or what, it's something that God has given us. And you have to find the person that's a potential mate or husband attractive. And here's what I'm trying to say. Don't settle. Let's say, oh, he's such a godly man. He treats me like a queen. He takes me out. He pampers me. He's wonderful. But I can't imagine myself kissing him. Hello?
Yeah, that's happened, that you feel like no chemistry in a romantic way, but you just idolize everything else about the person and think that it's just going to happen.
It's just going to happen because he's so wonderful in all the other aspects that it's going to happen, like Liz said. Well, chances are it won't. You got to be aware of that. And you know what? It doesn't make you a bad person. If a man has been wooing you and he's got all the right ingredients and he's an amazing guy, and it's just not, there's just not that spark. There's just nothing.
And we're not saying that the person has to be super good looking. We're just saying you have to be attracted. There has to be some chemistry between both of you.
Yes.
Because it's important. You're going to be with the same person forever, right?
Yeah.
Till you die. So it's not like, oh, well, he's not that good looking and I don't know if we're going to have good looking kids and stuff, but he's such a sweet guy and he's going to take good care of me. The opposite could be dangerous too. I mean, there's some women that just want looks.
They just want
and
the beautiful guy.
And all the other points, they kind of just brush them under the cover because they're so infatuated with the person. That's dangerous too. I mean, there has to be a good balance there.
There you go.
So...
Yeah, and I put down a list of the men in the Bible that were said to be very good looking. Moses was said to be good looking. David was said to be full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Imagine that, perfect in beauty. What does that mean? He must have been a good-looking chap. Adonijah was said to be a beautiful child, and he was hidden for 3 months. Hananiah, God said about Hananiah, don't be impressed with his looks and stature. So he was good-looking and tall. Okay? King Saul was said to be handsome in form and appearance. Daniel, the prophet Daniel. It's funny because when I read the Bible, I don't expect prophets to be good looking. I don't know why. Well, I always see them as with a long white beard and like very like mountain men who live as recluse, But Daniel was said to be, listen to this, from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. Wow. He was a good looking man. Joseph was said to be a really handsome guy. And Absalom, David's son, we know about his hair. It was apparently had incredible hair. And it's said that there was not a more handsome person than he among the children of Israel. I think the scripture takes the time to mention these details because in the human experience, they are important. And when I say important, like Liz said, don't make it over important, but respect the fact that there has to be that spark. Respect the fact that you have to look at that person and want to gaze upon them, want to just keep your eyes on them and say, I'm so lucky to be looking at that face. And
like they say, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So God matches people that are meant for each other, and they're gonna feel that connection together. Doesn't mean that they look like models. So we don't want you to misunderstand. We're not talking about being superficial and vain. We're just saying that this is an important point, and if you are looking at a spouse or a mate and you've been courted, and the guy's like always trying to get your attention, he's interested, but there just isn't that connection. Well, even if he has other points, you guys, might not make each other happy because there isn't that chemistry.
That's a good point. And, we're reaching the end of the podcast, and I'm just going to give my 2 cents here as a man, okay? If you're a woman, and whether you're 25 or 50, whether you're considering marriage for a first or second time. My mom used to say, a woman is like a flower. She needs to be picked up. I know we live in 2018. I know that. But there's just something that is so vital, I think, in the dynamics of the budding relationship when it's the guy who makes the first step. I know it might sound old school, but I believe that with all my heart. The Bible says that a man who findeth a wife findeth a good thing. Well, it's the man who's been looking, apparently, according to that verse. So he's the one who found the wife. And I think it's important for women to let themselves be found. And like Elisabeth said, to attract that mate, that great guy, by being that great gal, by being everything that God wants you to be as a woman. So dance with Jesus and wait for that guy to come and ask to cut in.
And don't wait in your 4 walls where nobody's going to find you or see you, because you ain't going to find a man that way. There's a lot of women that are just, living like hermits and, go into church and get out as fast as they can. Well, that's not where you're going to find somebody, right? So you have to, give yourself a chance to meet somebody and involve yourself in different social activities in church and stuff, and different Christian events. And they have all kinds of stuff now, summer camps, winter camps, all kinds of stuff for people that are single. So, be part of those things. Give yourself a chance to meet somebody.
Or if you're the 4 walls kind of person, go on Christian dating sites.
Yeah, we've done that. I actually went just because one of my friends, which was a lot older, recommended it, just because I was, working and taking care of my grandmother at the time, and I didn't have much time to meet somebody. And I actually just went out of curiosity because I was pretty young. I didn't think ever that I would find somebody online, and that was back in the day,
2001.
Yeah, something like that, 2001, where, if you went on the internet to find somebody, you were creepy and you were going to find a creeper.
It wasn't what it is today. I mean, online dating was, starting to gain popularity, but it wasn't by any means something that, like when I told people I found my wife online, they looked at me like, wow. I used to say to people, I found my wife, my house, and my dog online. I love the internet.
Yeah, so, that was back in the day, and, both of us were kind of, like social, but not that much. And, we didn't go out that much, and, because of our circumstances and stuff. And I had different responsibilities and stuff. So, God brought us together. But I'll say that one thing that was true for both of us is that we both prayed that God would bring the right person to us, and that he would prepare the other person's heart and our hearts. So, there's a chemistry, there's a timing in things where, later on when we talked, there was just a timing that was off for when he was searching, and there was a timing that was off for me when I had lost my mom. And later
the age difference also.
Later on, went off to Bible college. It just was not the right timing, and God had prepping to do in my heart. And during that year of Bible college, and Sebastien had some maturing to do, and different things that happened in our lives that we understood why things happened when they did. So, sometimes it's not because you're wishing and praying and praying and praying and ready that the other person that God has designed for you, has set aside for you, is ready.
Yeah.
So you have to pray for the other person. And, when someone that I esteem very much said, you can pray for your soulmate, for the person that God has planned for you, and pray, for them to find you, and for them to be ready, and for them to be that godly man that you're looking for. Well, God will really answer that prayer, and he really did for us.
Yeah, and it was kind of weird because we had that conversation years and years later. I told Elisabeth that I had begun praying for my future wife when I was 23, I think. And I prayed regularly for my future wife, that God would bring her to me, protect her, guide her, keep her, whatever. And we realized, looking back, that those years that I was praying for her were years when she was a teenager who had just lost her mom. So, when you're praying for your spouse, for your future spouse, whether you're 25 or 50 or 30, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know where they're at in their lives, and it can have a huge impact. I mean, I'm sure that the prayers I prayed back then actually probably strengthened Elisabeth during those difficult moments she was living as a teenager, because it's not easy to lose a parent, especially when you're just 16 years old.
Exactly. So, all these pointers, I know there's a lot of different things, and it can seem, especially if you're younger, looking for, all these points can be overwhelming. So, like Sebastien once said, Lord, do my courtship for me and guide me towards the right person. And that's why it's so important to pray.
Let's put them in context, dude. I was so incompetent with the opposite sex. And after a while, I went to God. I said, okay, if it was good for Billy Graham, because Billy Graham prayed that, it's good for me, Lord. So do my courtship for me, please.
Yeah, so put yourself out there. Pray. Pray for your future spouse, and, be choosy in the different points that we talked about. Respect yourself, and look for those common goals. And look especially for a man that really wants to please God and cares about, doing God's will. That is so, so important, because in everything else, I cannot stress it enough, in everything else, I've seen it in my own marriage, how Sebastien always wants to please God. Every direction, every decision we take as a married couple, every decision we've taken towards our upraising our kids, all of that plays on the line, And if he hadn't had the desire to please God, even if he didn't have the greatest background in the past of how he was raised, it would have been very, very hard for me to raise children in a godly way, right? So that was so important. And, that's always been really important to him, is to raise children that love the Lord and that seek his will and want to please him. And that's what we teach our children. So that's why I'm saying it has to be important for him at 19, at 18, whatever age you meet him, because it's going to follow in the rest of his life.
Amen to that. So we're reaching the end of this episode. We really hope it's been a blessing to you guys. And I just want to mention, we'll be taking a hiatus for the month of December. So this episode is airing on November 26th of this year. So for the month of December, we'll be taking a hiatus. There's a lot of work we have for Thriving on Purpose. There's a lot of future projects that we want to implement. And with the holidays coming, we know you guys are busy too. You're going to be doing a lot of stuff, preparing for the holidays and all that. So we know maybe our listeners' minds aren't as focused on listening to podcasts these days. And we just want to use that time to further our own business. But we'll be back with a bang in January.
Yeah, so there's a lot of content that we're preparing for Thriving on Purpose for January. So we really want to take a break from getting all those podcasts out, because there's a lot that God has been showing us and working in us, and we have great plans that the Lord is guiding us towards in 2019. So we know that we're going to come back and give you some really great meat and some really great podcasts. So we just want to get recharged and refocused and really give you really good content in 2019. So we wish you great holidays and
be blessed
and thrive on.
Thanks for listening to the Thriving on Purpose podcast. Be sure to visit thrivingonpurpose.com to access the show notes and to discover more fantastic content. Until next time, be blessed and may you thrive on purpose.